I'll tell you what, here's what we're going to do. I wanted to give you guys some paperwork before you went in. I'm going to give it to you when you leave, okay, and then I want you to look over the information that I'm going to give you. And what the paperwork's going to look like is going to look similar to what we just went over right before lunch. Okay, and what I did on that paperwork is I went through the same process that I went through with you right before lunch. Okay, and so what'll happen is that when you come out of the building, I want you, Jason's going to be standing right over here, and just grab a sheet from him. He'll give it to you, and you can look over the information and then start maybe coming up with some questions or some things you want to ask a little bit later, and you'll be able to see where we're coming from when we bought this property. We own this property, and then Heartland Fund 1 owns that property across the road right there. Okay. Now remember, the main thing that we wanted to do is look at the math and make sure the numbers made sense. That's the very first thing. All right. And as you see, when you get the numbers on this property, you're going to see the process we went through and ultimately why we decided that this was going to be one of the properties that we're going to buy. Okay, so the numbers will speak for themselves. Okay, now let's talk a little bit about location. And like I said during the seminar, I don't mean to downplay location a little bit, but I want you to look at this from a, remember the word I think of when we look at buying them. What's the word I think of? Resale, right? It's resale. So here we are. We're about a block and a half from the busiest mall in eastern Iowa. Okay, we've got a nice residential area. We've got condominiums over here. We've got condominiums over there built as condominiums and owner-occupied. As I said, we've got the busiest mall about a block and a half away, as well as most of the nice restaurants, grocery store, movie theaters, another block, three, 4 blocks away. Okay, so do you think we'd have a problem reselling this property if we need to? No. Okay. Now, as far as the condition of the property is concerned, remember we want to make sure we don't get into the process of spending a lot of money on the properties when we take over. All right, the minimum amount that we can do unless it's warranted to spend a lot of money. We really did 2 things on this property when we took it over. One, as you can probably tell, is we painted the exterior. Okay, so we put some exterior paint on it, and the other thing we did is we painted the common areas. All right, we did a little bit of landscaping. Some bushes were pulled. As you see, we did some landscaping around here too to give it a nice appearance when people walk in. As far as we want it to look good, of course, for the existing tenants because we want them to stay as long as possible. All right, and of course for any future tenants that come in here and want to rent. We currently have 2 vacancies. I'm going to take you in one. We're going to go down there and we'll talk a little bit more once we get down into that apartment. So what I'd ask you to do is go in this door, go down the steps, and take a left. The apartment's open. So go ahead.
So they just rose it a quarter?
That's, yeah, just raised it a quarter, yeah. And they still, yeah, that's
When you walk around, you're going to find that there's really nothing absolutely amazing about this unit, is there? Right? I mean, it's a typical 2-bedroom, a little over about 800 square foot apartment. Okay? Now, here are some key things that we did, though. When you look on your financial information, when we looked at it, we looked and we found out that the average rents in this building were a little bit under $500 a month. Okay, now the rents are at $550 a month per unit. Okay, and as I said, our occupancy is very good. We got 2 vacant now. Unfortunately, 1 is because a guy passed away like 2 days ago. So 12 units. The other thing we did was we, not surprisingly, converted this into condominiums, right? So technically, this is really a condo you're standing in. And what that will do, as you'll see in your numbers, is that's reduced our property taxes by pretty close to 40% is what it will do. The other thing that we did with this building, and it's going to be a common theme in a lot of the other buildings that you see, that we're going to see today, and I'll open up the door. It's not anything to look at. It's just the washer and dryer facility. Okay. We went ahead and we just raised the dryer a quarter, and we raised the washer a quarter. All right. For that, this building, for not doing any other work than that, will gross an extra $500 to $600 a year because we just did that. Now remember, that's not much in terms of cash flow, but now we've added another $6,000 to $10,000 of value to the property just by doing that simple thing. Okay. So when we take a look at it, if you really start molding and combining all of these things together, right? You combine the numbers and the manipulation of the numbers together. You combine the property condition, which was in good shape when we took it over. You combine that with the location that we're in. This was a deal that we decided that we needed to do. Okay? The other thing I'll tell you is, from a management standpoint, properties like this are also easier to manage. Okay, so you have less problems with tenants, you have less turnover, thank goodness, right? But you have less, what I would call those nagging tenant problems of not paying rent on time. Discipline problems, I'll call them, being noisy, breaking rules, some cases breaking the law. Not that you don't have that in places like this, but the frequency is really, really low. And so once you can have your management running basically on autopilot like that, it makes it a heck of a lot easier too. Okay? The building across the street we own as well, and you guys will see that as you go out, and that's a Heartland Fund building, and we did the exact same thing with that building that we did with this one. Okay, the only difference is that's 15 units, okay, and not surprisingly, we did the same thing. We converted them into condominiums, raised the rent, etc. Okay, and once again, a big part of it is location and condition when we went in there. I think the only money we really spent on that building is we did paint that building too when we initially bought it, but that was it. Okay, so if you got any questions that you want to ask me, you got something you want to visit about, write those down, and when we get back to the hotel, we'll go ahead and we'll discuss those. Okay? I'll open up the laundry door. You guys can take a look as you walk through there. Once you go out, make sure Jason gives you a sheet of paper with the financial numbers on it, okay? Before you go, and then look those over as we go to the next property. All right? Watch it. There we go. The building behind us there is the Earl May Nursery Garden Center. That's the second property I wanted to stop and have you guys take a look at for some important reasons. One of the things that we wanted to do in one of the groups that we formed to purchase real estate is we wanted some stability of income. We had a lot of folks that wanted the same amount of income coming in month after month. Okay, and of course it gets larger as time goes on. All right, but also they wanted to buy something ideally and make money when they bought it. Okay, well, this is an example of that. Of course, getting back to where we were before with the idea of resale, here we are, we're across the street from, like I said, the shopping mall, one of the busiest roads in Iowa right in front of us. Okay, so being able to resell this building here is probably not going to be a problem. The other thing we look at when we look at single-tenant commercial properties like this, and I'll talk more back at the summit, is we look for properties that are pretty much a big open shell. Okay? Now, why do we do that? We do that because we don't want to have to deal with any what I call build-out issues, okay, once we take over, or if we ever have to sell, or if we ever have to release it. So, for example, let's just pretend for a second this was a law office. Okay, with a whole bunch of law build-out, I'll call it. Okay, and let's say, for example, again, let's say the law firm decides they're going to leave. Well, if we want to attract a tenant in there, do you think it's going to be a law firm that's going to take it exactly the way it is? No, they're going to want to change and get everything, probably rip everything out. How much will that cost? A lot of money. Okay, so we tend to try to avoid those kinds of things. The other thing that we like when we looked at this property is the lease that's in place. Okay, right now the lease, it's a triple net lease, which basically means that the tenants pay all of the expenses, taxes, insurance, maintenance. The only thing the owners, us, are responsible for is the roof on the building, the physical structure. That's it. They take care of everything else. So the nice thing is, if there's ever a property tax increase, that's their problem. All right, they got a repair and maintenance problem inside, that's their problem. The air conditioning unit goes out, that's their problem. Okay, now this rents right now for about $9 a square foot. Okay, $9 a square foot. The market rent in this area right now is about $17 a square foot. Okay, $17 a square foot. So I want you to do the math for a second. Take $17 a square foot times 10,000 square feet. What do you get? you get about $170,000, don't you? $170,000. All right. We bought this building for $1.1 million. Okay. If you take $170,000 of net income, and let's just use simple math, and let's capitalize that or divide that by 10%. What do you get? $1.7 million, right? So we've got a serious amount of equity in this building right here, don't we? Okay. Now we've let this equity sit mainly because the current owners, as I said, a little more conservative. They like the monthly income stream and just kind of like to park that equity for a while. Okay. But this is a great example of a great commercial project that you get into, make money when you buy it, and have a nice income stream coming in, and have nice lease terms where you got a good tenant and, of course, a good location. Okay?
How long is the lease on that?
The lease on that expires in about 12 years, but we have an option with them to either extend it as far as, well, it's based on their percentage of sales, so it's a long story, but based on how much they sell out of here, we can actually collect more rent if we want to, and if they reach a certain point, we can renegotiate that rent and get higher rent if we choose to do so too.
Well, wait for questions, please.
Let's wait for questions if that's okay. All right. The last thing I'll mention to you is this: when you're looking at properties like this, there's always a lot of single-tenant properties for sale, always a lot. The majority of them will be sold at retail. Okay, so in other words, a lot of times you're going to see buildings like this costing $100, $200, $250 a square foot. Okay, make sure you don't get trapped in that process. You want to get things that not only that have a low cost per square foot, but make financial sense going in from a cash flow standpoint. Bottom line is, if I buy this for $250 a square foot, am I going to be able to resell it in the future for $250 a square foot? The answer many times is no. Sometimes it's yes, but many times it's no. And as I said, we'll cover those things when we get back to the summit, but just a couple things for you to chew on. Okay? All right, we'll see you at the next property.